claiming this is not an Air Force base. You can see the radar tower and all that in the background. Now if we go down a little, you can see warning, U.S. Air Force Station. See, this says warning, U.S. Air Force Station. It is unlawful to enter this area without the permission of the commander of the Montauk Air Force Station. While on this installation, all personnel and property are under the control, are subject to search, etc. Section 21, Internal Security Act, 1959. Point 50, USC 79. The Montauk Project, which was an experiment carried on at Montauk Point, New York, on the southeastern tip of Long Island, that's off of metropolitan New York, was essentially two projects. It was a mind control project where they did research on how to influence the mind of man using electromagnetics. It also evolved into a time travel project. They found out that they could actually bend time with the same equipment that they used to bend minds. This all started back in World War II. There was two major projects going on in World War II. One was the Rainbow Project, and the other was the Phoenix Project. Essentially, the Rainbow Project, well, let's first go into the background. During World War II, we were losing the war. We were outnumbered. We had Germany against us, most of Europe at that point. We had Italy against us. We had Japan against us. And it was felt it was a losing cause. So the government was essentially looking for that secret weapon that would win the war. So in 43, that area, 43, late 42, 43, 44, they launched a lot of these very avant-garde super science type projects out of almost desperation. One of them was the Rainbow Project, which we know is the Philadelphia Experiment. This was where they attempted to make a military Navy boat invisible, radar invisible, what they're interested in. The other project of interest was the Phoenix Project, which was essentially mind control research. This involved chemical mind control, psychological, use of PA systems, propaganda. It all started in World War II. They essentially worked on these two projects. The Philadelphia Experiment, or the Rainbow Project, was essentially a failure.
What were the dates on the Rainbow Project?
The Rainbow Project, actually, the very basic physics research started in the mid-30s. But actually, the government got interested after some successful tests were shown by the Advanced Sciences Institute at Princeton.
Institute for Advanced Study.
Yeah, the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton. They showed that on small scale, the invisibility could be achieved. This was work based upon the work of Nikola Tesla, Dr. John Eric von Neumann, and others that were in the Institute for Advanced Studies at Princeton. At that point, the Navy realized this thing had a huge tactical application. So they backed it and they funded it. And the research was done up until August of 1943, which we're not sure is the second to the last test or the last test. But August 12, 1943, the project was installed in a ship, the Eldridge. It was a destroyer escort class, not a real small boat, but not a real big battleship. The boat was built special for the Rainbow Project, where they were able to take one of the gun turrets on the front of the boat was fake. They could take it off, and they had a big opening to drop electronic equipment in, large generators, the whole 9 yards of it. And by 1943, they had already outfitted the Eldridge with all this equipment. And the boat was towed out into the harbor, the back end of Philadelphia Harbor, and the order was given to turn the project on, turn on the equipment. Duncan here and his half-brother Al were on the boat, and when they turned everything on, it worked. The boat did become radar invisible. The boat actually became visibly invisible. Then it disappeared entirely. It was gone. Of course, the two Cameron brothers, one Al Bielek today was Edward Cameron back then, and Duncan Cameron, not in this body but another body, decided the party was getting too rough. So they jumped overboard. Except at that point they didn't jump into the water. They expected to jump in the water, swim ashore, and get away from any rough times. But they found themselves in a vortex that the boat was in, like a wormhole in space and time, and they came out at Montauk Point in 1983, August 12th. And it's debatable whether they came out above ground in a grassy field or they came out below ground in the big antenna structure that was in the underground. We don't really know for sure because there is information that had both possibilities. But they ended up in 1983.
So they jumped 40 years.
Yeah, they jumped 40 years because the wormhole was from Philadelphia, 1943, all the way to Montauk, 1983. There was a secondary drop-off in 1963 in Brentwood, New York. And the two guys found themselves in 1943, 1983. Of course, they went back and forth a number of times. So it's a very convoluted story, so it's hard to really give a quick synopsis.
So they were taken from 83 and sent back to the ship. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they went back because they were trying at that point. The project in 83 was running awry. And they were trying to shut it down, but they realized it was locked in to the generators, the equipment on the boat. So somebody, we believe it was Duncan here, had to go back to the boat and smash all the generators. Al Bielek, of course, believes he was in on it. We don't know for sure. Somebody went back, smashed the generators. When the generators were smashed and the Rainbow shut down, the Rainbow project was stopped, then Montauk stopped, Philadelphia stopped, the piece of the Montauk Underground that was floating in hyperspace returned to its rightful area, the Eldridge returned to Philadelphia Harbor, and all of a sudden, there it was in the Philadelphia Harbor again. Of course, they couldn't raise the Eldridge. They couldn't get anybody on the radio. They would get a carrier a couple of times, but they weren't able to get anything that made any sense from the Eldridge, so they sent a launch out to the Eldridge to find out what happened, of course. And what they found is they found people wandering aimlessly around the deck of the ship. They found some people actually integrated into the deck of the ship with arms in, maybe a shoulder and a head sticking out. In other words, when the thing transitioned into hyperspace, if you moved, everything became energetic. Means you could move through that wall. If when it came back and was solid, if you were in that wall, you became part of that wall. Well, Tom Bearden talks of this theory and concept quite heavily. About putting the pencil through a piece of metal and having it be integrated into the piece of metal. That's been a famous accidental experiment that was done years ago that still nobody knows how to do at this point. But either way, the Navy saw, yes, the experiment worked. It was a tremendous success, but it also literally destroyed the mind of the men on the ship. So it was a success, but it was also a failure. So, of course, they abandoned that project, and they dumped the money into the Manhattan Project and developed the atomic bomb, bombed the bejesus out of the Japanese, and got us to win the war that way. In the meantime, they had won the German front essentially through psychological means, and just marching in with the Allies. But there was a lot of propaganda, a lot of psychological stuff being used on the Germans as well. But it was easy because the Germans were also disheartened at that point too. So the war was won, and it was decided, well, now we're up to 1948. Let's relaunch the Rainbow Project and see if we can figure out why did the men go nuts. So they relaunched it, split into 2 projects.
What happened to all these men?
As far as we know, they were sucked into a insane asylum mainly.
So they're probably still alive today.
Some of them are still alive today.
Okay.
Makes sense.
But now, let's go to 1948.
Okay.
They relaunched the project again. They had 2 phases they had to solve. They had to solve the engineering problem. They had to get the thing reproducible and small enough that it wouldn't take a battleship to hold the equipment. So that ended up went out to Los Alamos Laboratory in New Mexico, and that's what we call the stealth technology today, the 3rd level of stealth. The first is the radar cross-section, doesn't reflect much signal. The second is the carbon coating that absorbs the signal. The third is the electromagnetic bottle, which came out of the Philadelphia experiment research. The third is somewhat known but not talked of that much. You see it referred to fleetingly in articles in trade publications and such in the aircraft world. But the other side...
Which is the electromagnetic propulsion system?
No, it's the electromagnetic
Field
bottle.
generation.
It's the field generation that makes it essentially disappear.
Okay.
And they can get full invisibility as well as radar invisibility with the stealth. But that's not what we're here to discuss. That is a military secret, rightfully so. It's in our arsenal and is for the defense of the United States. So we're not going to go into how that works. Now, the second part that they had to solve is they had to figure out why did the people go nuts. So they launched the human factors side. That was sent out to Brookhaven National Labs right here on Long Island because they had the largest human factors research in the country. So that ended up out here on Long Island, that part of the project. And of course that was the heavier part because the other stuff was just engineering, physics and engineering to solve. You know, they already had the basis, they just had to develop it. So that was just essentially an industrial R&D project.
Well, when you're saying they already had the basis, how did they arrive at the basis?
From the Philadelphia experiment.
Okay. How did they arrive at why did they initiate the Philadelphia experiment? I mean, what grounds did they have to initiate the Philadelphia experiment?
Because the Institute of Advanced Sciences had run a number of small tests and proved that the theory worked.
Okay.
That they made models of ships disappear. They had a test in the Brooklyn Navy Yard where they had a destroyer tethered between 2 others, had the coils on the base of the destroyer, and all the equipment was on the other 2, and they made that ship radar invisible.
Okay.
Notice they had there was a good series of R&D work leading up to this thing.
Okay, and those technologies are being used right now in the stealth bomber.
Of course, it's highly evolved and more developed, so there's something that you don't need a battleship to move around.